few years ago, I had a close buddy who was going through a tough time in his marriage, and he and his wife, they were just not getting along, and things were cascading, and they were getting worse and worse and worse. And it was one of those relationships where his pain became my pain, where I felt like the infirmity of my friend. And it was heartbreaking to me. And so I would go out on nights where I would either be riding my bike or running or whatever, and I would go down and past his house, and I would sort of just get in the backside of the backyard in the middle of an open lot that was near, and I would just stretch my hands out. I would just pray over that household. I would command every single thing that was coming against their relationship to be broken. I mean, I would do everything you could imagine. But they didn't make it. The marriage dissolved. They got a divorce. The household broke up. It was a big mess. And in the middle of all the talk about something not being the will of God, and this wasn't right, and it shouldn't have happened, you know what? That was all fine. But it did happen. And now, in the middle of the rubble, like, what do we do now? Because we all have gone through those seasons in life where maybe it's not exactly what we planned, and maybe it's not what God would have hoped for us, but you know what? It happened. And now what? Because you can't just give up. You can't just act as if life doesn't have something more out there waiting for you. You can't just sit in it and just sulk forever, right? Like, there comes a point in life where we actually have to be willing to restart. We have to be willing to step into the next thing that God has for us, because you know what? The previous thing didn't work out. It's okay to restart. It's okay to actually believe that God still has something for you, even though the last thing didn't work. Maybe that last job, maybe it didn't work out. Maybe the last team didn't work out. Maybe the relationship didn't work. But what about now? So in order to go through this, we're just going to look at moments in the lives of God's people through just a series of weeks. And we're just going to see how each of them were able to restart after something catastrophic. So let's just start in the book of Genesis. And we're going to look at this moment where Noah and his family of 8 had to restart. Now, for those of you who are a little bit new to church, the story of Noah, like, you kind of attach a nice pretty boat and some water and everybody died. And let me just kind of clear some things up for you. There was a boat and there was some water and everybody died. And so we're going to kind of pick up the story after the water had gone away, and we're going to see how Noah and his family restarted. Genesis chapter 8, beginning at verse 13. It says, "In the 601st year, in the first month, the first day of the month, the waters were dried from off the earth. And Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked. And behold, the face of the ground was dry. In the second month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth had dried out. Then God said to Noah, 'Go out from the ark, you and your wife, and your sons wives with you. Bring out with you every living thing that is with you of all flesh, birds and animals and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, that they may swarm on the earth, and be fruitful and multiply on the earth.'" So we see here God give Noah a command to go out from the ark. When God spoke, "Go out from the ark," if we kept on reading, what we would see is that Noah actually went out from the ark. Why did he go out from the ark? Because God spoke. Noah had the confidence to go out of the ark because God spoke to him and told him, "Go out of the ark." But there was something that happened before God spoke to Noah. It said that Noah removed the covering of the ark. Now, him removing the covering of the ark was a pretty big deal because that covering provided shelter and it provided safety for Noah during a period of time when the waters were rising, when the rains were coming down. So it took a great bit of confidence for Noah to actually remove the covering of the ark, because there was this sort of safety that he was saying he didn't need anymore, and he had the confidence to remove it. You know, I do think that even if God doesn't speak to us in a loud voice, that there is the possibility of us coming to an eventuality of faith just by following him, just by watching him move, so that we actually have the confidence to do something. We should have confidence in what we are doing as we walk day by day, just trying to follow God and serve God. We should always be looking forward to what he's calling us into, but we need to have the confidence to take that step, right? We see Jesus say this in Luke chapter 9 and verse 62. He says, "No one who puts their hand to the plow and looks back is worthy of the kingdom of God." When you start building a boat, that's a pretty big deal when the sun's still shining. Like, if God asked you to build a boat for a flood and there had never been a flood before, how much confidence would you have in building it? Like, how can we move forward with confidence where we're not just doing something, wondering, and we're still looking back like, well, they're building houses and I'm building a boat. Let me just tell you this. You don't build a house when there's about to be a flood. You don't build a house to prepare for a flood. But how can I have the confidence to build a boat when there's no rain? I have a tendency, I want to look back. When you say yes to that person and you step in relationship with them, it doesn't do you any good to scroll the pages and see what all the other people who you loved are doing. They don't matter anymore. What they do, who they married, where they work, how much they have, how much they don't have, who cares? No one who puts their hand to the plow and looks back is worthy of the kingdom of God. We need confidence in our moving forward. I see this story with a moment in the life of the Apostle Paul. Let's step out of the ark story for a minute. I promise I'll get back to it. But I see a confidence in him that I want. But how do we get there? So we have this moment here in Acts where the Apostle Paul is on a missionary journey. He's been preaching from one end of the island. He's made it all the way to the other end, the last city he's going to preach at. And he comes across this very intelligent city leader, a proconsul. And in conversations with him, the man says, look, I want to hear the gospel. So Paul begins to preach the gospel to him. There's a problem, though. There is a magician that is friends with the leader. And so now Paul is preaching the gospel to the leader, but the magician there keeps on talking. Now, here's what I understand. I understand, especially in this generation, where we find ourselves living, we're supposed to be nice all the time. We're supposed to demonstrate the mercy of Jesus all the time. But since we're in the middle of a flood story where God wipes out the entire world, I think it's okay for us to talk a little bit about something else. Here in the middle of this moment of our time, I actually think I'm going to start this. The magician keeps talking. Paul then turns to the magician in Acts chapter 13 and verse 10. This is my new methodology. I just want to put it out there so you can hear this. He looks at the magician. He says, you son of a devil. You thought I was about to say something else. I saw you. You enemy of all righteousness, full of deceit and villainy. The hand of the Lord is upon you. Before I go any further, who is coming upon the magician? The hand of the Lord. The hand of the Lord is coming upon the magician because the magician is speaking against the gospel of God. I just want to make sure we're tracking. The hand of the Lord is upon you, and he says, now you will be blind and unable to see the sun for a time. And immediately darkness fell on the man, and they began leading him around by the hand. Like, that's our new evangelistic method. Somebody just keeps talking, you son of the devil. Because here's what I love. The very next verse, it says, then the proconsul believed. Why did he believe? Because the power of God was demonstrated. The Apostle Paul had so much confidence in the power of God that he knew that when he spoke those words, that God would move. I want that kind of confidence. What happens is we go through a little bit of life and things don't always work out the way we want them to work out. Things don't always work out the way they should work out. Things aren't always fair, and we get frustrated because we're hurting. But I actually believe that if we can understand our relationship with God a little better, that his gospel will give us the words that we can step forward with nothing but faith and just believe that God's going to work it out. And so Noah gets to this place where he removes the covering. And I just want us to see how he got to that place of confidence where he was willing to remove the covering. So consider this. God told Noah it was going to rain in 7 days. Genesis chapter 7 and verse 1. He said, Noah, get in the ark, you and your household, because I'm going to send rain in 7 days, and it's going to rain for 40 days and 40 nights. So Noah took his family, and he got in the ark, and God shut the door. And then it began to rain exactly when God said it was going to rain. Just a little side note, when Jesus said his coming is going to be like the days of Noah when people are around doing everything and they're not going to know that it happened. I want you to understand the people who weren't expecting Jesus didn't understand. The people who weren't expecting Jesus, it came as a surprise like a thief in the night. But it wasn't a surprise to Noah and his household. To Noah and his household, they were commanded to go get in the ark of safety. Why? Because the destruction that had been appointed for the people that surrounded Noah had not been appointed for Noah. God has never appointed his people to experience his judgment. God has called his people to experience life and peace. It's just important sometimes, and even the character of God all the way back in Genesis, which never changes today. Why do we think it's going to be different today? Noah found favor, God saved him. Okay, so Noah is told by God to go get in the ark. He gets in the ark and it starts raining. It rains for 40 days and 40 nights. It wasn't time to take the covering off while it's raining. I know sometimes it feels like miraculous to go do something crazy in the middle of something crazy, but sometimes just be practical. If it's raining, don't take the roof off and expect God to just keep the rain out of the house. Here's an idea. He told you to build something, stand under it, and don't take the roof off until the rain stops. I'm one of these, I don't know if you're like me, but I have a tendency to put air in a tire that has a hole in it. Patch the hole first. If I have a slow leak, it's got to be a slow leak. And by a slow leak, I mean it takes 2 days for the tire to run flat. Now, if it runs flat in an hour, okay, we might get that fixed. But if it's a day or two, I will just go by the Wawa every day because it's free air. And I'll just every day, every 2 days, I'll just stop at the Wawa, fill the thing up until weeks later, I get tired of it. And then finally, I go spend the hour to get the tire fixed. Don't keep putting air in a tire that's got a hole in it. Don't take the roof off when it is still raining. It's not a sign of faith. It is not a sign of just great trust in God to do something stupid when he gave you a covering, leave it on during the rain. Be smart. So there's that. 40 days, it rained. Noah left the covering on the ark. Then the rain stopped. But the water was still getting higher. The floods were still coming up. And so the boat was still floating. And the level of the boat was getting higher and higher. So Noah didn't take the covering take the covering of the ark off yet. This is kind of a big deal because the water kept going up for another 150 days. What if he'd have taken the covering of the ark off on like day 5 after the rain had stopped? Because that might be me. I'm usually the one that has a tendency to, okay, we're in the clear. But think about it. Have you ever gone to the beach? You ever sat out on the beach for just a day? Get sunburned like to no end. Burnt. Just burnt. Think about that. He removes the covering of the ark. What if he did on day 10? For another 140 days after that, he'd still be out in the water with the boat nowhere to land. I'm just saying that sometimes we have to wait on God. Sometimes we just have to wait on the process to play out. Say, well, God could make the waters go down in a moment. He could. He just usually doesn't. We need to have an expectation not for what God can do, but for what God does. And that's like a big deal for us. Because we like to just use the word impossible and just think of the craziest thing ever and say, well, God's going to do that. But is that how God works? It's not a matter of can he. This is not a question of can God. This is a question of what does God do? So the water came up. It kept coming up for 150 days. The covering is still on the ark. We are now 190 days into this moment. Sometimes we just talk about it raining for 40 days and 40 nights and like that was it. Like a month and a half later, Noah got off the boat. No, we're 190 days in. Noah's still in a boat. Still has a covering. And then it said the water began to go down. But the water went down because God began to blow. God began to move the winds to shift things out of the way that needed to be out of the way in order for the ark to lower, in order for Noah to be able to get off. And this is, I think, where a lot of us kind of get lost in the process of starting over. It took after 190 days, it took another 150 days for God to blow all the things out of the way that were in the way of Noah and his family. And we don't always want to take the time to recover. We don't always want to take the time to just sit in the presence of God and just let him heal us. And just let him remove the hurt from the moment of the catastrophe, for him to remove the hurt from the trauma. We don't want to just sit in his presence and just wait on him. Isaiah chapter 40 and verse 31 says, they that wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. I don't want us to miss this point about Noah. When his dad was 182, that's when Noah was born. And then for another 575 years, Noah's dad kept having kids. Well, his mom did, but they were credited to his dad. That means Noah had brothers, and Noah had sisters, and Noah had nieces, and Noah had nephews. And we don't know their names because Noah never looked back. He just looked forward. But let's not forget what he had to be considering in those 150 days. He was looking at his family. Thank God his family was safe. But what about his brother? What about his sisters? I mean, I have 4 kids. I love my kids. I love my wife. But it would be a little hard on a boat of safety and thinking they're my little nephews outside dying in a flood. There's my brothers out there dying in a flood. Don't lose the story. This was traumatic, what Noah was dealing with. And when you go through something traumatic, it takes time for you to trust again. It takes time for you to have hope again. It takes time for you to believe that things are going to work out. Sometimes it just takes hours and days and months for God to just remove the hurt from you so that you can have the faith to step forward. You have to let God make a way. And I know so there are sometimes preachers or even movements that just would cast this idea that if you're mourning, if you lost somebody and you're crying, that this is not, we don't cry, Christians don't get upset. Let me just put that to rest. Jesus, going to the tomb of one of his best friends named Lazarus, cried. Jesus cried. Now keep in mind, Jesus knew he was about to raise him from the dead, but he didn't step up to the tomb going, yeah, about to raise him up. I don't want my kids to be at my funeral saying, thank God he's in heaven. No, cry. Cry for me. Like, mourn my passing. I want you to miss me. I want you to cry about me. I want you to go put flowers on my tombstone. It takes time. Right? It takes time. And some moments when we get through something or we're in the middle of something, we're just standing in the weeds, it doesn't feel like God's doing anything. He's on that boat now for 340 days. The last 300, there's been no rain, and it doesn't feel like anything's going on. Have you ever been in the middle of the weeds and you just didn't know where to go? You didn't know where you were. You didn't know where you go. You didn't know what was happening. And in the middle of what didn't seem like God was doing anything, God was making a way. The thing is, at least it seems like this in my life, God will start out there where I'm actually going, and he'll work his way from where I'm going to where I am. I would sure like him to just start clearing the path where I am so I could just walk with him all the way to that place. But sometimes it feels like I'm just waiting. I'm just sitting here waiting on God to move like he's doing nothing when he's moving all the time. He's out there in my future, preparing a way where right now there seems to be no way. God was blowing the winds to move the waters to get out of the way so that the ark could settle down. But it wasn't time yet. We need to learn to wait on God. So what do I do? Just sit around? No, you just keep doing good. Galatians chapter 6 and verse 9. Let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. In the middle of waiting on God to push out of the way what needs to be moved out of the way, we need to keep doing good. Let's just be, offensive for a minute. The last year and a half, I don't know, maybe you'd never behaved badly, but there were moments I behaved badly. There were moments I was irritated. There were just things that I thought were stupid. There were things that I didn't agree with. There were frustrating points for me as a human being. Not as a follower of Jesus, just as a flawed human being. Things I got asked to do, I don't want to. I'm a grown man. Don't tell me what to do. Let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season you'll reap if you do not quit. I didn't want to do good. I wanted to behave badly. I wanted them to hear what I really thought. I wanted to talk about it. Sometimes I did. But I think a lot of us, we could look back and we could see our attitudes or our behaviors, and we separated ourselves from friends that didn't believe the way that we believed. Separated ourselves from people we really liked because we just didn't agree on things. Separated ourselves from even places where God had planted us because we're just frustrated with all that was going on. We didn't behave well in the middle of waiting. There is a goodness that should always flow from us while we're waiting on God to do the thing that we're desiring him to do. And we are not ready. None of us are ready to step into the next season if we've not eliminated the bad behavior from this season. We will never, ever, ever be ready for transition if we're still living in the middle of transgression. So we wait. We wait on him to work on our heart. We wait on him to give us the power. And we just get confident in doing good. And we just keep doing good. How long? As long as it takes. Sometimes it takes a while. I want you to consider the life of David. In 1 Samuel chapter 16 and verse 13. He's out in the field. No one even believed that he had the potential to be a king. The prophet is in the house of Jesse to anoint one of his boys to be king, and David doesn't even get included to the job interview. Some of you're not confident enough to even put your resume in. Would you just for a minute see what God sees? Would you for a minute see what God can do with you? And you be willing. You be willing to put yourself out there. Shawn, last time it didn't work out, but you're a different person this time. Be ready for God to use you. So they called David in. And it said the prophet took the horn of oil and anointed David in the midst of his brothers. And the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him from that moment forward. From that moment, he was anointed king. If we look at the years that the word used for David at that time, he's 14, 15, 16 at the oldest. Like, could have been younger, but let's just say it's in that range. We want to make it not quite as bad. We have to push all the way out from 1 Samuel into 2 Samuel, verse 5, verse 4, where we see how old he is when he was actually king. He was anointed king back here in 1 Samuel 16, 13, but he didn't become king until 2 Samuel 5, 4. It says, when David was 30 years old, he began to reign. 30! Year 1, I'm the king. Year 5, I'm the king. A decade later, I'm probably never going to be king. Right? We give up on stuff. God's moving things out of the way. God's out there preparing. He's moving the waters for Noah. He's moving things for Noah to be prepared so that he can start over. Don't press restart until God gets all the stuff out of the way that needs to be out of the way. Just wait on him. They that wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. You're going to need strength for the next thing. You can't do it in your own strength. If you could have, you would have done it before. But you couldn't. So you need new strength for a new season. You just wait on him. So now we get through this period of time, and now the ark is just sitting. Now the water's down, it's sitting, it's not floating anymore, but he still doesn't take the covering off. He began testing. And this is a part, especially us spirit-filled people, we don't like testing anything. We just like to believe, no, that's my favorite preacher, that's my favorite prophet. If they said it, it's happening. Preachers don't get a blank check. The only person who gets a blank check in your life is Jesus. That's it. Everybody else, everyone else, they have to be tested. Paul said, look, even if an angel of light comes, preaching a different gospel, as if there could even be a different gospel, don't listen to him. You could see an angel, you could have a vision of an angel in your bedroom. And if they tell you something that is different from the gospel of God, no. It's a hard no. So think about it. If an angel, like if a demon can show up like an angel, do you not think that mere mortals can just miss it? Doesn't mean they're terrible, doesn't mean they're awful, doesn't mean they're like they hate Jesus, doesn't mean they're even a false prophet. It just means they're wrong. I don't agree with everything I've ever said. I mean, we follow God to the best of our ability in the moment, but we're not always right. So we have to test things. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 21 says, test all things, hold fast to what is good. Let me tell you it this way. If something gives you faith to behave good, that's a pretty good test. Like if you hear something and it causes you actual anxiety or frustration and you're actually mean after you heard it, maybe that was off. Why? Because it encouraged you to not do good, and we've already been commanded by the gospel when we're waiting to do good. So if what I hear causes bad behavior, I have to question that. What is that? It's testing. Noah tested the moment. The ark had stopped moving. Was it time to take the covering off? He wasn't sure. So he sent a raven out. The reason why he sent a raven out is because a raven can live on carnage. It can live on dead stuff. If there was nothing for it to live on, it would have to come back. But if it went out and it didn't come back, then he would know, okay, well, he's living on something. Maybe it's time, maybe it's not. Now here's where I'm going to use the word flesh in a nice way. If you're looking to buy a car and your flesh likes red. That's like sending a raven out. You just want a red car. There's nothing wrong with you wanting a red car. It's not sinful to want a red car. So when I'm using the raven as that metaphor, just see it that way. Like, okay, I like these 4 cars. They're all red. I want a red car. Jesus doesn't want you to have a red car. I know sometimes we like to over-spiritualize things. Jesus doesn't want you to have a 2-story house. You might want a 2-story house. You might want a red car. That's fine. You're just testing things that you like it. I actually think if you want to get married, you should think that person is attractive. What is that? That's the flesh. I didn't even know my wife. I saw her across the street. I'm like, there wasn't anything spiritual about that. Nothing. I promise you. That was my raven. The raven went out. But then he sent the dove out. Why did he send the dove out? Because now we're talking about peace. Now we're talking about something spiritual. A dove's not going to live on something dead. The dove goes out and he comes back. Why did he come back? Because there wasn't anything for him to eat. He's not going to eat what the raven ate. Your spirit's not going to be satisfied by what satisfies your flesh. Don't you make that step. Don't you take the covering off. Don't you have confidence to do anything if you don't feel peace to do it. That's not your flesh. That's your heart. In Matthew chapter 10 and verse 13, Jesus said it like this. If you go up to a house, let your peace come upon it, if the house is worthy. But if the house is not worthy, let your peace return to you. What does that mean? That means I've got 4 red cars. I like them all. I go sit in this one. It just doesn't feel right. What's that? My peace came back to me. It didn't stay in the car. If the peace stayed in the car, I could get in the car and drive the car. Why? Because I'm following peace. Some of you heard that phrase. That's what that means. The peace went in. The peace stayed. I feel good about it. I get in the car. I still feel good about it. I drive the car. I still feel good about it. I buy the car. But if I sit in the car that my flesh liked and my peace comes back to me, I get in like, it's not right. That's because that transmission might blow up in 2 weeks. Oh, God doesn't care about, God absolutely cares about stuff like that. If you are generous, if you give, he says, I'll rebuke the devourer for your name's sake. We think that means he's going to take the bad transmission and keep it from blowing up that he told you not to drive. You sent your peace. Your peace should come back to you. It's wrong. It's the wrong red. Go on to the next one. Oh, this one feels good. This house feels right. Right? Like that's just our peace staying. When Noah sent the dove out and the dove didn't come back, his peace stayed. Now the time was right. Now it was time to take the covering off. And here's what I love. Noah did what he could do. He took the covering off. Once he did everything he could do, he had obeyed God. He had waited on God. He had tested what was going on. He had confidence to do what he could do by faith. He removed the covering. Then God spoke. 1 year and 20 days later, God spoke to Noah and said, go out and be fruitful and multiply. And some of you have waited on God, and you've waited on God, and you've waited on God, and you've tested the market, and you've tested the opportunities, and you just feel good. And I'm just telling you, in this place where you are in a good position, I want you to just start listening, because I believe that God will speak to you. I believe that God will say to you, now is the time. You've waited. Your brokenness has been healed. It's no longer time to sit back. Now it's time for you to step into the destiny that I have for you right now. Now it's time for you to step into the next season that I have for you right now. It's not a time of waiting. It's not a time of preparing. You've already prepared. You've already waited. Now it's time to go out and be fruitful and multiply. And now we just have to obey him.